Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Unfiltered Productions. You've got myself, Sherry Teague, and Cindy Kraft. We are the owners of K&K, and Cindy's wearing a beautiful blue color that I wanted her to show you the graphic on. Of course, mine's Florida. And hers says, "Fun in the sun." Where in the world, Cindy?
Well, we had these done, if you see up underneath, we had a family beach retreat in May. So I had SPF shirts custom done for everybody. And it was nice to see, not just that we all matched, but it was nice to keep people from getting sunburned as well. Always got to be practical.
And I think there was still a sunburn, right? There's still a sunburn that happened.
Yes, but it was on legs. So I didn't buy bodysuits. I guess next time I'll have to get some sort of pants involved.
Yeah,
But
next time there'll have to be a full head to toe SPF suit. But coming fresh off vacation, Cindy came with ideas, all right, and she came with some irritations potentially. And the name of this unfiltered podcast is an interesting thing that might have gotten your attention. And it's reviewers. Are they part of the problem? Cindy, talk to me.
Well, we recently did a podcast where we talked about the Oasis lull that we're currently in. So whenever there's a big change, we have education, we get, some degree of interest. I get excited, we'll call it interest in the rest of the people because it's new or different, and so we pay attention. But right now, E1 was not a big drastic change. We're waiting for the proposed rule to see what might change down the road, but even there, it's going to be a while out. And so we're kind of in a no man's land of, do we need education? Do we not need education? What should we be focusing on? Having been through many of these lulls, being involved with Oasis since it started, what I find interesting is we tend to then focus on, okay, what are our problems? What are the ones that keep getting all the corrections? Do we have individual clinicians that we're always making the same corrections? And is there a particular part of the Oasis that is always the problem? And we do that with our outsourcing services here. I ask our Oasis reviewers regularly, what are you seeing in terms of trends? Do we need to sit down with the agency and talk about that? And in that other podcast, we talked about the biggest offender, which is the functional assessment, the issues that will not pass on, and we have to keep going back to. But I have also learned during these lulls is we tend to make the focus of the need the clinician. The clinician is the problem. The clinician doesn't understand. The clinician needs education. The clinician needs a new method. Like we need to teach them again how to go through the home and go into the bathroom and go over here and we're going to go through all these steps again because the clinician just doesn't understand. And then I see things come out about, we really have to explain this because Oasis is so hard and it's so complicated. And now we're going to put AI in it so the clinician doesn't really have to think that. It'll listen, it'll do it for them, and all this other. And Sherry knows where I'm going. So wait a minute. Clinicians who literally hold patients' lives in their hands. The decisions that they make on those home visits can lead to hospitalizations, disastrous outcomes. They're handling medications. And you may say, well, that's a nursing thing. Well, therapy, getting people up and moving around, done wrong, can cause havoc, cause falls, cause all kinds of things. So these are people we entrust with human lives. And we do not think they're smart enough to figure out how to fill out a standardized form. That they have to go to a special class, and if they don't have the special letters, then they just don't understand. And we have to make sure the smart people explain to the dumb people how to do this. I think clinicians to a certain extent either resent that or just have given up and said, okay, well, I'm not smart enough. So you just tell me what answers you want me to put, and I'll just agree to that. But the tone of these is not only frustrating to me because I believe the clinician is the driving force of all of it. They wrote the guidance manual for the clinician. They said, you're the one collecting the data. We trust you to collect the data. Here's the information you need because some of our questions, when you read them, don't make sense. So let's explain what we're trying to say so that you know which answer to pick and how to do it. Somehow that got hijacked into super secret. It's free information. It was written for them. And then when something is wrong, they need to be educated. When agencies reach out to us at K&K about this, I like to go a little deeper and say, are these new clinicians? Because new clinicians need education. Are they new to home health in general, or are they new to you? Because new to you might need some relearning to make sure there aren't interesting habits that have developed. But then I'll ask about the review process. Do you have a standardized way, either being done internally or using an outsourced provider like K&K? No. No, we have one or two people, they do it. Do you have kind of a checklist of what, if it's reviewer A or reviewer B, are they looking at it the same way? Crickets. To the point, in one instance, I was told you cannot have a standardized QA response because every QA person is different. I have one that is very attentive to detail and the other one that doesn't pay that much attention. Hold up, hold up.
Cindy, that's what I was going to say. Not only that, there's two is a good QA department. That's an easy one to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. It's just an easy one to rectify any issues. But a lot of these QA departments are 4 and 5 people deep, right?
Right. So your inconsistency becomes compounded of whoever's looking at which chart that day. Or so in providing feedback to the clinician, are you consistent? Whether it's one review person, you could say, well, they are, but what is the point of the feedback? Is the feedback geared to be educational, to refer to the guidance so that you don't repeat the mistake? Or is it, hey, Nurse Betty, I changed this. Are you okay with it? Well, that's very friendly, but that's not necessarily explaining to the nurse why you changed it. And here's the rationale from the guidance. So we've spent a lot of time at K&K standardizing guidance-driven feedback when we do the OASIS review. The goal is for the clinician to understand what happened so that they don't repeat it. But when agencies tell me there's no real standardization, it just kind of, but I know they're all on the same page. So we're willing to say the clinicians are clueless and need more education, but having credentials or having done this long enough, it's all good by default. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about reviewers. We have a bunch of them at K&K. I've been in that role. I've worked with many strong folks, but you still have to make sure. You have to make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what the information is in the guidance, how to apply it, and that we haven't, as you like to say, Sherry, started kind of whittling the corners off the box, and it's ending up more like a circle because I heard one thing at a conference once, and so now I told everybody else, and this, but that's not really what the guidance says now.
Cindy, that's a great point. That's a great point. What have you set out in your agency policy wise when you do send one of those reviewers to a continuing ed or to a conference and they come back with new ideas? Are they just freewheeling able to implement those ideas regardless of whether the other reviewers are aware or in the know? Or how do you retrofit, or what is your policy as far as how those things get implemented?
And how do you validate that those are the
Accurate,
correct understanding of what was provided?
right?
Because as someone who does a lot of OASIS education, I always say, if somebody says, well, Cindy Kraft said, here's my email, please check. Because you can mishear something. You think that's what it meant, and then it takes on a life of its own that it's okay to do it this way. And so you want to check against the official guidance. But I think we have to periodically assess the review process. Is it consistent? Is it focused on education? And am I confident, whether it's reviewer A, B, C, D, E, and F, that it's a comparable review? Because I think part of the issue when we see clinicians just kind of going through the motions on the review thing is all it takes is for one reviewer to give me slightly different feedback than the other to just go,
Nah,
I'll fill it out the best I can. I'll turn it in. The experts will correct it. I'll just agree. But then the next time I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take my best shot at it. But now I know if reviewer A gets it, I'll probably get through clean. If C gets it, oh gosh, I'm going to get all these other things. So whatever makes them happy, I'll just agree to those changes. So it really, our goal today, when I asked Sherry about this, was not to speak meanly or derogatory of reviewers. I just see far too often, especially during these lull periods, where we just assume The clinician doesn't know. And if the clinician just got smarter, all of this would be fixed. I think a lull is a great time to confirm the review process and those that do it. Is it consistent? Can I take a new take an OASIS done by a clinician, and obviously not within the EMR, but take it, give it to reviewer A, B, and C, and then look at the final product of those three on the same one. So not them review each other's after somebody changed it. Take one an OASIS that the clinician has done and let the three of them separately review it and see if you get the same results. Now we know, Sherry, it's a whole other can of worms if they're going to code it, because there could be slightly different and they're all right, and that's why I'm not a coder. But you should get the same results on the OASIS side and similar feedback and attention to detail from all three. If you're not, that could be contributing to the never-ending correction process of the clinician who just becomes resigned to there's always going to be something they don't like, and I'll just agree to it. And then we look at it and say, well, we want our agency to grow. Oh my gosh, if we grow, then we need more clinicians. And every time we get more clinicians, I got to get X number of review people because they have to babysit the OASIS because we can't possibly stop 100% review. You can't. With a standardized process, you can get to the point where the need for corrections is minimal. And we just had a client, Sherry, who is going to continue with us for coding, but not with the OASIS anymore because they kept getting the reviews back that didn't need corrections, which I know, terrible business model, but makes my heart happy because that's what the review process for OASIS should be. It's stable, it's consistent, but the patient lives alone, and it says to read the question. It's an interview question, and you're not reading the question. You're trying to answer it 9 o'clock later. This is just a dance. We need to say, okay, how do we straighten this out so that errors are an anomaly? And once I can, if I have a standardized process, confirm that this person consistently doesn't make those mistakes, why am I going to waste time and dime reviewing that 100% anyway? Well, why? It doesn't make sense.
But we want to warn you very clearly that apathy is scary when it comes to the clinicians. We literally have had folks that we've identified that the clinician was Christmas treeing the OASIS only so the review team would finish it, return it finished, quote unquote, and they would sign it and move it on. That is dangerous on both sides. Okay.
Right.
It's dangerous on the clinician side because that clinician is basically writing reminder notes and leaving little pieces of breadcrumbs back to that chart and that documentation should they ever get called to be in front of a judge and testify. The reviewer, on the other hand, you're probably licensed, right? You probably have a nursing license or a therapy license of some sort, or you've been in this field for 100 years. You have certifications, you have coding certifications, you have OASIS certifications. All of those things hold an ethical standard. And if you're creating documentation based off half information, that's another scary place to be.
Right.
So first of all, identify if you have apathy. If you have apathy, you need to stop and review why it's so apathetic and what's going on. That consistency that Cindy mentioned is so important. And one of the reasons why at K&K we developed that consistent flow sheet so that, yeah, there might be a few words off. It might be a verb off or something, but it's the same guidance as being preached on each of the items when we find an error. That's super, super important. But Cindy, what other kinds of things can they do to make sure that their review staff is up to stuff?
Well, I know we've developed, if you've followed K&K at all, you see in our newsletter about knowledge assessments, which just because I'm averse to the word test, because I don't want to give people certificates or anything like that. But we have developed a specific knowledge assessment for reviewers because reviewing an OASIS is not the same as being a data collector. And a data collector, you're the clinician, this is what you need to look for in this scenario, and what answer would you pick? A reviewer has to go off what's documented and what the clinician already did pick. And is it right? Is it not right? And so we wanted to create a knowledge assessment that goes that direction. So we have 5 different scenarios, and then here's how the clinician scored these particular items. Is it right or is it not right? To really say, okay, based on the information provided, are you able to validate that response? And We've used it with several agencies. I think it's again, I call it a knowledge assessment because even if everybody got 90%, if you missed one, I would want to know what that is.
Right.
I would want to know what that 10% is. Or if all my reviewers missed the same one, let's talk about what the issue is and get that gap closed. So it's not meant to be, yay, I got a gold star situation, but to help agencies be confident that the reviewer has the same level of understanding. And I think that certification tests, in my experience, lean more toward the clinician
Mhm.
of what you've seen in the home and this is what the patient said or this is what the patient did. A reviewer doesn't have that same access. So I think things develop like, well, I think they should have had a bedside commode. And so I'm going to change the toileting thing to a bedside commode answer because everything I read, I think they need one. You're crossing the line. You don't get to do that. You can go back to the clinician and say, hey, this is what I saw, what happened with that. But I think sometimes that inferring things based on what we would do is problematic on the review side. It's either there or it's not. And we have to make sure that that response that they've chosen, does it fit the guidance the best? So is it a perfect test? I wouldn't say so, but it was really intended to help us have good conversations about key elements that a reviewer needs to make sure that they're validating appropriately and that they're not inadvertently being inconsistent, which throws clinicians off, or not having the same level of understanding, which then what does that mean for our outcomes? What does that mean in value-based purchasing? We know that how you get an outcome is driven by the clinician, but OASIS is the measurement tool. So it's not just what's on the start, it's what's on the discharge, what's on the resumption, what's on the recert. Do we know that any time that's being reviewed, is it consistent? And is it with an eye toward ultimately, let's decrease the errors over time?
And I think that we've probably driven it home that inconsistency equals apathy. Honestly, in your clinicians, if they keep getting different information back, they know your number, they know your text information and your phone number, so they will put you off. If you're one of those people that comes in with inconsistencies, they're naturally going to push you off. Cindy, on the assessment for the reviewers, is this one of those things that could be done just as a spot check, or is it something that you could use it, two or three times or four times a year to do quarterly spot checks on your reviewers and your
It really is a spot check. We can develop subsequent ones, but right now we have the single point in time, which has worked quite effectively in terms of it's very comprehensive with 5 different scenarios and it has an assortment of questions with each. Um, like I said, it really is to hit the most commonly seen issues, but it's just it's a tool option. Our overriding point, though, back to the beginning, Sherry, is if we're seeing in this Oasis lull before the next, who knows what it is, could be Oasis F. I'm going to laugh if that's the letter they pick. They're opening themselves up for a variety of things. Maybe they'll just skip it and go to G, or we'll have E2 or who knows what. But in this period, when we go back to saying we keep making the same corrections over and over and over again, please look more than just, I think they don't know, we need to educate the clinician. You may spend time and dime on that and not fix the problem.
right.
The consistency of that review process, and I think a lull is a good time to do it. We're not dealing with new stuff and all this other, and does everybody understand? That knowledge level of the review team should be solid. We haven't had a significant change since we went to E. So it's a good time to make sure we've got our bases covered. So whatever new gets added, we all pay attention to the new, but then we don't do like the plate spinner, start focusing on the new, and then the old just starts wobbling all over the place again. Especially in the functional assessment where the language has been consistent for 2 decades, the fact it's the number one correction spot, just, I don't get it.
And I think that with the all payer submission that starts on July
Yep.
1st, and some of you are already doing those all payer submissions, some of you were not even collecting OASIS data unless you were made to, and you're trying to play catch up in those times. I think this is a great time to see where your review staff is as you go into the all payer, because if you started doing OASIS data on your commercials for your commercial insurances, for example, for those that qualify and have to have an OASIS, i.e. they're over 18 and they're not pregnant, they need to be reviewed in a way that's going to make you stay compliant regardless of who you're submitting. They all these rules apply to every setting and every payer. They are payer agnostic, correct?
Yes, and that's a great point because up till this point, I've talked to many agencies that have either not, they've had the clinicians fill it out on everybody, but they either did not review or sort of reviewed any other payer. We got to make sure that that habit does not continue when it's mandatory because that same level of accuracy is expected regardless of payer. So habits may have developed about pay more attention to these and maybe not so much there.
Hmm.
That process of attention to the Medicare payers is going to have to be across the board. You can't have those. And some of it, Sherry, I think is, well, but they said it's not going to be reimbursement impact. It's not going to be in outcomes now. Well, I added the now. It's not in outcomes. It's not in VBP. Yet is the word.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a reason they're collecting it. And we got to make sure out of the gate that that baseline information is correct. We cannot keep doing what happens over on the Medicare side, which is everybody could feed themselves and roll until VBP went to the GGs. And now you can't roll and you can't feed yourself.
Well, and it's going to
We,
be a little bit of a paradigm shift for your clinicians because if they're collecting private insurance, workers' comp, all those other things in data, some of those functional items are going to be independent because those patients aren't required to be homebound. And so
correct.
that's going to add an interesting layer to what you see on your Medicare side potentially if they start filling out the OASIS data on patients that are walkie talkies, adults that maybe have an infectious wound or something that they need
Right.
to get the home to get their treatment, but they're not homebound and they're not required to be homebound.
Correct.
That's gonna be a little bit of a mind change for your clinicians because then they have to go into the Medicare ones, which Oasis does set the payment level in the risk adjustment and all the things that come with that. So it's you got to be aware of that, and now's the time to shore up your review
Right.
team and to educate those maybe those differences and anomalies that they can expect to see in those other payers. I think that's going to be super.
That's an excellent point, Sherry, because the consistency, I mean, we have some clients that send us only the ones that get submitted to Medicare and then did in-house on the other.
Yeah.
We're going to have to make sure, again, because what we start reporting in July will become the baseline of outcomes and stuff later because they need a place to start. So we're going to have a period of time where it's like, but nothing happens with these, like happened when the GGs got added. They don't do anything. Now they do, and now it's like, oops, now we got it. No,
I believe we have
let's
a
let's 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 clean start the rest of the payers. Let's just
I
make sure
believe
that's right.
Unfiltered that says nobody puts GGs in the corner because they did get ignored for so long, and now with
Yes.
payers, I'm telling you, your clinicians are going to be like, "What? What just happened?" They're going to be confused when they're being told that it's okay to report somebody as independent on this Oasis, but on the other one, we have to report them as unsafe.
Right, but again, it's accuracy above all.
Mhm.
The guidance isn't going to be different for other payers. The guidance is the guidance. So even if they're not required to be homebound, it's the same safety concern. If you do it on your own and it scares me, then I am going to apply that same logic to the accuracy of reporting. So we don't want folks to, just say, well, wait a minute, the private pay doesn't have to be homebound, so, it's fine that they're all zeros. But are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they may not be just because it's a different payer. So I think that's a great point to say whatever our process is, even if we're like we've nailed it down on the Medicare side, what has been going on with other payers, and are we ready to take what's worked and make it bigger so it's consistent across all payment sources?
Mhm. And I think it's important that you take that opportunity while we're in a lull because it's probably not going to last. That's
No.
one thing about home health. The regulations are going to change. They always do. And so getting ready and being prepared for these C changes, which was what I consider July 1st to be, and how are we going to send that information in and what it's going to look like. And I don't even want to think about the interview questions and the BIMs for somebody who's my peer. You know what I mean? That is working
Right.
every day and doing what they're supposed to do, and you have to go and ask them these questions. It's going to be odd for your clinicians to do that, right? I mean, it's going to
Well,
be
yeah, then let's provide a quick teachable moment. Just remind the clinicians that you can't put no on the BIMs because you don't think they need to have it done. No means that The patient, no matter how hard you try, you cannot understand them.
Right.
And so that's what no is for. We see on the Medicare side, unfortunately, still fairly regularly, a no to the BIMs, which means you can't understand them. But then you did the whole rest of the assessment and they did all the rest of the interview questions and you could understand them.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the right answer for the BIMS. The BIMS does give you a very specific what to do if the patient is not going to participate. And it's yes, and then you answer, and then you end up with a 9-9. So that's what you do if our peer is like, "You kidding me? I'm not going to do that." Or does not does doesn't answer the questions because they think this is goofy. Fine, there's a way to do it, but it's not no.
And maybe
Please let's not do that on all the other payers.
if you have a question about any of those kinds of things, you guys can just reply to this newsletter that this podcast is in, and we see those quickly and we get back in touch quickly, and we love to hear the feedback. Cindy, did you have anything else before we finish?
No, I enjoy doing these. We hope that you enjoy participating in them. If you have ideas for different things, or maybe there's something at your agency you feel really passionate about and want to share, we're open to guests. So just let us know what you're thinking.
Thank you so much for coming along our ride with us, and hopefully that you'll have a great day taking care of our seniors, and be safe out there.